I want to go ahead and say welcome to everyone. This is our November OK Ethics program. We are so glad that you are here, and we are ready to hear from President Katricia Pierson of East Central University. We were just chatting before we opened the webinar. This is actually the third time, third time's a charm, I guess. First, she was snowed out in February, and then she was scheduled again in April, and COVID obviously changed everything in April. And so now we are finally getting to hear from her. We are so pleased. So thank you all for being with us today. I also wanted to make an announcement. Many of you have already renewed your membership for the 2020-21 year, but those are available now. You can visit our website, okethics.org/join, to see all of our benefits and different levels for this year. We have added a virtual level since we are virtual for the foreseeable future. We are hoping to get back together this spring when we hopefully COVID will be in a much better place then. Until then, we will continue to remain safe, but we have premium membership options available, which just means that you already have your prepaid seats to the luncheons like usual, but you then in addition get access to the virtual programs as well. So if you have any questions about your membership, please feel free to email me, director@okethics.com, and we will get you all taken care of. We also have a new LinkedIn group. When you log into LinkedIn the next time, please go and search for Oklahoma Business Ethics Consortium in the groups category and request to join. We would love to have you all there. You know, we miss seeing each other in person. We miss networking with one another and being able to shake hands and say hello. So LinkedIn is where we're moving that virtually, and we will be posting discussion points from today's program and hopefully having another engaging discussion just like we would if we were at our tables. So please go ahead and do that today as well. So I believe those are all of my announcements for today. We are going to go ahead and get started with our guiding principles. So I think that this man, especially if you're from Tulsa, is no stranger to you. He's been involved with OK Ethics for a long time. Travis Jones is presenting our guiding principle for today. He is the CEO of Career Development Partners and is a member of our OK Ethics board. So thanks, Travis, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Brent. We every month we have an opportunity to talk about something that's impacted our lives that we can share a guiding principle. And so today I wanted to share about a conversation I had a couple of years ago with my financial advisor. And it was interesting. When I talked to my financial advisor, he asked me questions about what's important to me. And I was telling him about a professor I had in college, and that was a lot of years ago. And he used to tell us, he says, remember what you do today is important because it impacts tomorrow. And so I'd mentioned that a number of times. And so I came back to visit this financial advisor another time. And when we sat down, he said to me, he says, tell me what your 200-year plan is for your life. And I'm thinking, my 200-year plan for my life? Thinking, wow, yes, I don't know. Let's talk about that. And really, it became a kind of an excellent time for me to think about what I do today is so important for tomorrow. And we talked about the importance of that. And so the guiding principle that I'd like to share with you today is about service and service to self and to others. There's a Chinese saying, and I was looking up some things. If you want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. If you want to be happy for a day, go fishing. And if you want to be happy for a year, inherit a fortune. But if you want to be happy for a lifetime, then serve other people. And service to others is where happiness is really found, according to that Chinese saying. And so I got thinking about that. How do you serve other people? We've all heard it's better to give than to receive. Why do you say that? Why do people say that? The point in saying that it's better to give than to receive is because it's a powerful pathway to personal growth in your life, and also for lasting impact and lasting happiness. And so serving others, they'll tell you that when you serve other people, it's one of those things that to your brain, it is pleasure. And so service to others needs to be pleasurable. But sometimes we find out that serving others is not that way. But serving others really should be something that brings you happiness. It helps you to become healthier, wealthier, and more productive and meaningful. That's what service is to others. But we need to realize that sometimes serving others doesn't feel great. And it doesn't feel great sometimes when we spend all our time serving others. But let me give you a couple thoughts about how to serve others and to feel great about it. And one is this: to find your passion, find it at what is it that's important to you? What is the value? And I love it when we have our speakers like Dr. Pierson today. She's sharing something that she's passionate about. And all of our speakers do that. And that's a way to serve other people. Learn something so well and share it with other people. Second thing is give your time to something. It's valuable to give your time to organizations and to people, whether it's 1 hour a month or a couple hours a month or one day a year. But find some time to serve other people. Do it on a regular basis and think about that. Third thing is give to organizations that have transparent aims and goals and with the results. You know, sometimes you give to an organization, you don't know what they're all about. But I will tell you, Oklahoma Ethics is about promoting ethics in the workplace and in the world. And so the things that you learn today, the things you learn each time you come to these meetings is really, it's a worthy investment. That's why we come today, because somebody's going to serve us by sharing about their passion and what is important to them. Fourth thing is be other-minded. Be willing to give people more than you receive. And that's really, really important, is think about that. Be proactive is the next thing, not reactive. That means serve before you're asked. Look for opportunities to serve others. I heard a story on the radio the other day, and they were interviewing this guy, and they said, what is something that's really meaningful for you at Thanksgiving? Memory. And he talked about in 1959, when his mother died, that somebody in a church down the street heard about it, and they brought them a Thanksgiving dinner. That's a way to serve other people. And being a holiday like today, take somebody a dinner. This guy, that was 61 years ago. And I heard that last week on a radio program. They said that really made a difference in his family because his mother just passed away. And it still impacted him today. Think about that 200-year plan for your life. Something you do today is going to impact somebody tomorrow. Our program today, our speaker is speaking about being a leader and serving others and promoting ethics in the workplace. She's a graduate of Oklahoma Leadership Oklahoma. And that organization, it helps individuals to shape the future. I looked at that, shaping the future. And that's what service does. It shapes the future. And so today, as you listen to her speak, be the leader that serves other people. Be the leader that serves them by ethical behavior, by ethical conversations, by ethics in some way or another. Realize that each and every one of us have some direct influence that we are modeling ethics to others in what we do. I want to end with this just real quickly, and I'm not the program. I know I'm speaking a little long, but here. Jonathan Edwards. Some of you know Jonathan Edwards. He was an American. He was a theologian. He was he was actually a preacher. He was a philosopher. And his legacy is still living today because he was born in the early 1700s. And he made some resolutions that really impacted his life and the lives of the people he taught. Let me read a couple of resolutions. Here's the first one. It says he resolved to live every day with all of his might as much as he could serving other people. And that man had a great influence on a lot of people. He resolved never to lose one moment of time to improve that moment, to make it profitable in any way that he possibly could. So every moment is important. What I do today is important. It impacts tomorrow, is the way he thought. He resolved never to do anything which he would despise or think meanly of another person. He wouldn't do that. He resolved to never do anything out of revenge, and he resolved to do anything and everything that he should and not be afraid that this may be the last thing that he ever did. And so his plan is now in its 300th year. So you talk about a 200-year plan. think about what you do today, what you say today, what you hear today, what you hear Dr. Pierson here say to us today. Take it back and serve somebody else by sharing with them. Here's some things I learned today about ethics as a leader, and I'm a leader, and I want to share with you something that's really, really important. So that's my thoughts for today, the guiding principle. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you for sharing with us. That is all so important to keep in mind. So we're going to go ahead and move right on to our keynote presentation today.
All right, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. It truly is. And yes, third time's a charm. Absolutely. So before we get started, I want to get our minds thinking about who we are, the businesses we work for, because I'm going to be able to work in quite a bit of what Travis just shared, because he could have done my presentation today. That's a lot of what I'm talking about, is our responsibility, our roles in shaping ethics on where we work. So I want you to do a mind experiment for a moment. And we're just going to take a brief moment, but if your mind wanders, keep coming back to this. You have the opportunity to start your organization, your business, your agency on an alien planet. We're not, you've been invited to come to this alien planet, but the number of people that you're going to take is very limited, 4, 5, 6 people at the most. So you want to showcase the best traits about your organization. So who are you going to send? Just jot down very quickly 3, 4, 5 people that truly represent your organization. So then once you get those names down, well, what traits do they demonstrate? What are they showing to people that make your organization what it is? So just take a minute. And like I say, if your mind wanders during the presentation, come back to it, because toward the end of the presentation, we're going to come back to what you've written down. So I want to, again, thank everyone for being here. And I need to thank people who have invited me. I need to specifically thank Dr. Nathan Meller, who did invite me to speak a year ago. I need to thank the people I work with every day, administrators, faculty, staff, but most importantly, the students of East Central University. This presentation is actually happening because of them. And I serve ECU at the pleasure of the regents of the Regional University System of Oklahoma, and I thank them for their continuing support. Let me tell you a little bit about ECU. We're a public 4-year university. We grant bachelor's and master's degrees. We have a little over 3,500 students. We have incredible success with job placement. I just learned the numbers just a few days ago, that 88% of our graduates are employed in Oklahoma 1 year after graduation. The others are employed, but in their home states or other countries. We have incredible success with graduate and professional school acceptance rates, education, business. We have a strong entrepreneurial program. Our 3-year average in the medical schools, 93%. Placement in the law school is a phenomenal 100%. We're doing all that and being incredibly affordable. We've been recognized nationally for our affordability, in fact. So it's a wonderful university. You get a meaningful degree. It's a great value. So when I was asked to speak, I instantly thought about 3 students who set me on this path of ethical reflection. Senior finance major Camden Ferguson, and then we have 2 recent graduates, accounting graduate Cullen Edens, and recent business administration graduate Chance Hogstad. So let me tell you about the incident that set me on this path and why these students are so important to my journey. So you're going to get my story. I'm going to do a little bit of a literature review, and then I'm going to tell you about the actions and outcomes. And then we'll come back to the exercise I asked you to do. So universities are places of shared governance. The business of the university is shared with the stakeholders. And we typically do that through committees, and we have a lot of committees. And just about every facet of the university is committee-based: budget, hiring, curriculum development, program review, assessment, athletics, just to name a few. We even have a committee on committees to make sure it's all operating smoothly. Strategic planning is just the same. We have a Shared Horizons Strategic Planning Committee. It's 3 faculty, 3 staff, and 3 students, and they're working with the cabinet and myself to ensure the university is on track to meet its goals. So toward the end of the fall semester, this is November of 2019, 1 year ago, we were pulling together the results of the first 6 months of a 5-year plan. And one of our goals is to keep student loan debt at ECU below the national average. Sounds pretty simple, but which average do we use? We knew we wanted to compare with the federal government's integrated post-secondary education data system. This is known as IPEDS. But what do we include with this federal data? Do we use the average for university undergraduate students? Could we pull out only public regional universities from private universities, from large research universities? Do we use the national average, which includes graduate debt, including law and medical school? As you can see, it's complex. So then we have to also examine or determine, how are we going to calculate that average and make sure our comparison is similar? So you can calculate student loan debt by looking at only those students who take out loans. For us, that's undergraduates, that's 50% of our population. Only 50% take out loans. Or do we look at all the students, all 3,500 students? Half don't take out loans, but the other half do. That's actually how most colleges will calculate their debt, using the total students. And which average do we display? This is where the ethical question came up with the students. If we look at only those students who take out loans, our average debt is $15,000, well below the $25,000, I believe it is nationally, for undergraduate students. If we look at all students, that average is only $10,000. If you start adding in the graduate students, again, about 60% take out loans. If you look at their debt, it's $40,000. It's a little bit above national average. If you add in the graduate students, undergraduate students, all students with and without debt, our average is $23,000. Again, below the national average. So as you've heard, data can create 2 different affordability pictures of the institution. And it was interesting to participate in this discussion. The faculty and staff kind of sat back because the students were so engaged. And they began wrestling with, well, what number do you use? Mr. Edens in particular, our accounting graduate, asked a very spot on question. Well, how much money do we give in scholarships to students? Well, about $2.5 million a year. So they continued to argue, and he argued that by using all students, it showed the true affordability because of all those scholarships that are coming in private donors, university tuition waivers. So that's what we went with. Then there was the discussion, how do you report our CFI? Our CFI is a composite financial index rating, or CFI score. And this score is calculated through a variety of ratios. Some have more weight than others. It's not easily understood, but it does give an overall relative financial health of a higher education institution. For public institutions, it runs from a -4 to a +10. Private institutions, it's -1 to a +3. Very different picture. And for a public institution, a score of 1.1 or greater shows you're being financially responsible. This score gets used by auditors, institutional accreditors. For us, that's the Higher Learning Commission, and by the U.S. Department of Education. Again, working with the Strategic Planning Committee, I made the recommendation, let's present it in a way that didn't create any anxiety. This number, it's volatile, it will bounce up and down. We are a financially healthy, but also a very conservative campus. So we will save money for several years if we know we're going to have to make a big purchase. And that will really bounce that CFI score around. And we had been saving for some major repairs. Well, Mr. Ferguson he shared with us, he'd just come from an ethics class, and he said, you know, people's feelings shouldn't be the primary factor here. In fact, he argued very eloquently that taking people's feelings into account is a paternalistic approach that could be considered unethical, because we're judging what people can or may not be able to comprehend. Again, it was a really lively debate on how to present the information. We did agree we don't want to cause anxiety, but we don't want to conceal anything either. And it was our coordinator for academic services, Haley Vickers. She came up with a solution. She was able to create an infographic that showed our CFI in relation to the benchmarks that also had just a little bit of explanation with it. It sounds really simple. It took us a couple of weeks to develop it, but the point is that day changed me. And I thank the students for challenging me, challenging the committee to have the conversation. And I have to admit, most people will not speak up in front of me. There's something about being the university president that shuts a conversation down. If as soon as I open my mouth, that's the direction we're going. And it's been difficult to participate on committees like this. But I also take my role as an educator. I've been in education over 20 years, and I am an educator to this day. And so I began reflecting, what is my role shaping ethical behavior with that committee, with the students, the faculty and staff who were there? How much influence do I actually have in modeling ethical behavior for the campus? And I began reading everything I could get my hands on ethics and leadership responsibility, so I could understand my role. And I kid you not, a couple of weeks into that research, Dr. Nathan Meller called me and said, would you like to speak? So that's just the way the world works. It just worked out. Well, I continued, even though it took me a year to get here. I continue to research to this day the effects of leadership and ethical behavior. But I have to say, it didn't just dawn on me. ECU, like most colleges and universities, are institutionally accredited. And institutional accreditation says that you're a quality institution, you have quality education, but that you also adhere to federal compliance requirements and certain quality standards. I've been a peer reviewer for the Higher Learning Commission, who happens to be our accreditor, for about 10 years. And ethics is just what we do. One of the criterion, we have 5 criteria. One of the criterion focuses on ethics and integrity. So I've been doing reviews of other institutions with this focus in mind, but I never really, until those students triggered me, never really thought about my responsibility to my employees. So again, many thanks to these students. So now I'm going to transition into what the literature says, the studies that are out there. So James Avey in 2012 investigated employee voice. As I mentioned, a lot of people don't speak up. And so what I've learned is employees who feel psychologically safe will voice concerns or they'll offer resolutions to problems. You know, psychological well-being is predicated on ethical behavior of the organization's leadership. But this notion isn't new. It goes back. There are studies that go back just over 50 years from what I've read that examine why some employees voice concerns, some stay silent, or some will just exit the company. So employee voice, it's considered an organizational citizenship skill, and it involves, and I quote, constructive, change-oriented communication intended to improve the situation. This is several researchers, scholars, ethics scholars note this. This quotes from Van Dyne and Lapine. So employee voice leads to higher employee commitment, employee retention, collective learning. Employees who are voicing their concerns or offering solutions, it leads to innovation and improves processes, improves efficiency. Also, the negative side, serious consequences can occur when employees aren't voicing their concerns. You know, safety can be jeopardized, accounting irregularities can occur or be suppressed if employees are not speaking up. So, as I said, AV concurs with various scholars that the ability to speak out is important because of those innovations, the idea exchange, and it reduces unethical behavior. So I'd like to emphasize that ethical leadership is more than simply possessing, you know, attributes of honesty, integrity, trustworthiness. It's our active demonstration of those behaviors. It basically says this is how we expect everyone to behave at our organization. Trevino and Brown, about 20 years ago, in their studies on morality in the workplace, stated that to be a moral manager means that the leader openly and explicitly talks about ethics and empowers employees to be just and to seek justice. Moral leaders are a model of ethical behavior, and they reward employees who also demonstrate that ethical behavior. And their investigations show that ethical leadership will predict outcomes on the effectiveness of leaders, employee satisfaction with the job, their willingness to report problems, and provide solutions to management. All of those outcomes lead to a transformational culture. Again, there's studies by Bass and Stiedelmeier that label ethical leaders as authentic leaders, and an authentic leader is a transformational leader. They not only pursue noble ends through legitimate means, but also engage in the uplifting of their followers, of their employees, and they're able to realize these mutually beneficial, rewarding visions for the company, for the employees. It really inspires me to be one of these leaders. But Trevino and Brown also show that ethical leaders will use a reward system in some way to help recognize those employees who are walking the walk, so to speak. Another pair of scholars, Demertis and Axdogan, affirm what Trevino and Brown's work covers, in that ethical leadership shapes the entire climate of an organization. And their work focuses on communication systems. How do you communicate what those expectations are? What are the moral messages for employees? How do you communicate what the work condition should be and what an employee's expected behavior should be in it? But I do want to caution that there's a downside to a leader's influence on an organization. This is fairly recent. There's not much out there about this on what followers or what employees, what their influence is on the leader. Most of it is on the positive, but there is some research out there that says that there could be negative consequences even when you have great employees, when you have great followers. And I found this particularly interesting because I began looking at my interactions on campus. So what is the cost of ethical behavior? I'll start with that first. Leaders who are modeling great behavior, trying to encourage others to have great behavior, can often feel depleted, mentally fatigued. And when you're depleted and feeling mentally fatigued, your willpower diminishes. So their research, Linma and Johnson's research, looks at moral licensing. And so moral licensing theory is where you're engaged in laudable and socially desirable acts, and you will feel licensed to engage in questionable or unethical acts without any fear of detracting from your positive self-image. So ego depletion and moral licensing essentially leads to an abusive or an unethical behavior. And they argue that managers who consistently model good behavior, commendable behavior, are especially prone to feeling depleted. In other words, you feel burned out. So think about yourself. If you're in that position, whether you're a committee chair, really trying to model that good behavior and trying to reward other people, you are giving a lot. And that goes back to what Travis said at the beginning, this service to others. You are doing a service to others by modeling good behavior, but you have to take care of yourself in there. So let me give you some examples just to make sure we're on the same page. You know, a manager, if you're a manager and you are trying your best to be consistent in your treatment of everyone, but let's be honest, some people are easier to like than others. Think about it. You have those people, and, you know, thinking about that mind experiment at the beginning, you know, when I said you could send people to an alien planet, you may have immediately went to those people that you want to get out of your organization, well, and keep all the ones you like around you. But the problem is, we're good managers and we want to be fair and consistent, even to those people who, they may be great employees, but they're kind of hard to like. That depletes you. Believe it or not, it's depleting. And then there are, you know, sometimes our behaviors run counter to our self-interest. And these are also, you know, can cause this kind of burnout. So an example that Lynn, Ma, and Johnson use is the example of a CEO of a power company who invest in, you know, proper filtration and disposal of toxins. So this is going to increase that company's expenses, and higher expenses means smaller returns, and it may even mean a smaller bonus for that CEO. So the CEO is going to feel a conflict. That conflict will cause depletion. You know, if she invests in filtration and disposal procedures. She may use moral licensing. Think about this as that equivocation. I did something right, so when I do something bad, it won't be all that bad. Think about, your diet. I have friends who do this. Well, I've eaten my vegetables and kept my carbs down, all week long. So this hot veg Sunday right now isn't going to be so bad. I know that seems silly, but that is moral licensing and can happen at our organizations. And it can happen, you're at a greater risk if you're feeling a little burned out. So you really have to take care of yourself during all of this. Complex decision-making can also be depleting. Different studies, Ahmed, Klotz, and Bolino, they came out in just 2 months ago, September of 2020, with a study that these complex demands on leaders, as I'm going to use one of their quotes. I'm looking at their quote because I thought it was really good. Ethical leader behavior requires non-trivial amounts of self-control and can lead to feeling depleted. They really use this word quite a bit. And with that, willpower energy is reduced. So I also mentioned Ahmed, Klotz, and Bolino, and just 2 months ago, and they're talking about moral licensing. They have uncovered, and it's the only one I can find so far, their study on narcissism and group identification. These are two different concepts, but they've done studies on both. Narcissism, they argue, it is a personality trait, but it also can be a temporary state that all of us will fall into at some time or another. People like to feel important, they like to feel unique, they crave admiration and validation. And if that's carried out over a time period or becomes a permanent state, arrogance and exploitation, can be the result. They also argued, and this was a little bit of a sting, that all leaders, and that was their term, they use that, and I try to avoid those all-inclusive words, but they said all leaders tend to have more narcissism than others. I was kind of like, oh, but there you go. But they also, what I found really interesting is they looked at the consequence of the leader identifying with followers. And as I mentioned, I work with a lot of committees. I sit on a lot of committees because I like to participate. I want to be part of this shared governance we have at the institution. But they say, even in that, leaders really can't be one of the gang. You just can't, because you have more status, you have more power, autonomy, and freedom than any of the employees, any of the followers. Here's where their study goes that I think is interesting. When you begin to identify with a group, this group identity, as they refer to it, you will begin to take credit for the actions of others. Even though you may not do much, you'll take credit. And it may be an unconscious thing, but you're taking credit. As you build up these credits, this is where their study really goes into depth. You begin to build credits for all this good work that's happening. You're more likely then to say, well, I've done all this great, so this one bad thing isn't going to be so bad. So this vicarious moral licensing really will lead into unethical behavior. That one, and again, I just learned about this a couple of months ago, and it's still part of this ethical reflection. So how do you prevent that? I don't want to step away from working with committees. I want to continue being involved in the day-to-day of the institution. I like people. Zoom calls or, this was great. I love all of you, but it would be so much better if we were together because I really enjoy people. So what I've done just in that time that I learned about this work, this research, make sure to practice humility. They do say in their work that humble leaders tend not to fall into this trap. So I've got, I don't know if you can see, but on my desk, I have one of those glass things on my desk. And so I have reminders of humility and, and even some prayer. And I will say, if this doesn't work for me, the way my life works is, if arrogance becomes too much, if pride becomes too much, God for me has a way of reminding me of Proverbs 16. Pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Um, it's good to have those little taps occasionally. So what are the moral messages that you would want to convey to your employees? And there's a significant body of work on this. So I want you now to think about who you wrote down and what are those traits. I had the pleasure of doing this example 2 years ago. I was struggling. I had a team that didn't, a cabinet of 4 people, myself. We were not working well together. We were having trouble making some good hires. So Dean of our School of Business, Wendell Godwin, asked or introduced me to a person out of Dallas. He's the CEO of Rise Performance Group, Mark Finner. We brought him in to help with development. He had us do that exercise. And, we did one of those retreats, got away from the campus. We jotted down, he wanted us to do it independently. So we did, we jotted down. We have almost 500 employees. So we jotted down, he said, he gave us 6 to 10. We jot down people. He had us go up to the whiteboard independently and put the names on with these Post-it notes, 1 name per Post-it note. We came up with 6 people. And I looked around as he asked me to organize them. And I'm just like, okay, 1, none of us were listed. So that said something to us. But why these 6 people? Did we not know anybody else? We have almost 500 employees. And that's when Mark Finner said, okay, something is special about these people, so write down the traits. Why did you write these people down? Again, 1 trait, 1 Post-it note, go back to the whiteboard. 4. We came up with 4 things between us, and we're very creative people. We should have had a lot more, but only 4 things. These became our core values for the institution. We're humble, kind, and generous. We care for students and one another. We go the extra mile to provide an exceptional experience to the people we serve. We're forward-thinking and adaptable. We're open to new ideas, and we're committed to solving problems, whether our own or others. We brought that back to campus to the Shared Horizons Committee. They worked with it, they tweaked it, got the language down. We did get some pushback from some groups on campus who, they weren't academic enough. They weren't, they were too plain. These were run of the mill. But 24 hours, and I'm not exaggerating, we rolled them out to an all campus convocation. Within 24 hours, we had several offices print them on poster board and display them. 1 person printed cards and delivered them to our offices. And this is a person that, I don't want to say he's a curmudgeon, but he was one of our office curmudgeons. But there was something that happened. People embraced these because they could see it. So then it went back, how do we keep the energy going? How do we reward people for walking the walk, as I said earlier? And so we came up with a shout out. We have a link on our intranet. So you can give a shout out to anyone that you witness living those 4 values. We send that out in a Monday communication, and I'm going to tell you, it feels really good every Monday to see 3, 4, 5 shout outs. And this is for anyone. If you see a student picking up trash and keeping the campus in good shape, find out that student's name. Let's get a shout out. But this is people rewarding one another. So I'm going to go back into, and I'm keeping an eye on my time because I do want to leave a few moments for questions at the end. But in that, I'm going to share, this is a brag. I always feel like I have to disclose. We completed a work climate survey because things were bad before rolling out these values. We did a work climate survey. We compared ourselves to other institutions of the same size, master's granting institutions. And we were in the warrants immediate attention or very poor rating for almost all areas. You know, this is communication, shared governance, respect, appreciation, policies. 2 years later, we've been doing this survey now. It's the Great Colleges to Work For survey. We've been doing it for 2 years, and we now exceed other master's degree granting institutions. We're in that good to great category. Thank you, Jim Collins, good to great. Fairness, communication, professional development, and shared governance. It doesn't stop there. There's a lot of other work to be done. But you know, that survey is just one, and we can share that great news with our campus. Then I have one more thing, you know, going back to what I started with, employee voice. Once you create that safety, once you create that framework, if you will, for what your institution stands for, what are your ethical values, your code of conduct, and people know how to act in it, they will begin to voice their concerns and voice their solutions. I have 2 brief examples that have occurred. One, faculty have taken on revising our general education program. And I don't want to gloss over this. It's hard work. And as you heard, there's a lot of hurdles in higher ed to get things done because of our committee structures, our accreditation model. It all works together to ensure quality standards. Faculty said, you know what, we need to redo the general education to make sure critical thinking and problem solving are key components of gen ed so that our students have what they need when they go into the workforce. That's underway. We had another group come to me and say, we need a wellness incentive. We have people who are overweight, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, a lot of medical issues, and it's causing, one, we need to help them. But maybe if we help them, it'll reduce our health insurance premiums. So these people had nothing to gain by doing this wellness incentive. We rolled this out a year ago, and groups of people are now participating. We've got people who've lost weight. We had one group of guys who've lost collectively, I think it's about 8 of them have lost around 150 pounds together. They've reduced blood pressure. They've improved cholesterol counts. They brag about being off of medication just because diet and exercise has helped them. So, you know, that's what it's about. That's what we do as leaders, is provide that safe space for employees to make sure they are doing everything they can. And I want to say that's been my goal. I've been president, I'm coming on my 4th year, but how do we make sure that people feel valued? We spend more time at work than we do with our families for the most part. And you need to feel like this place respects who you are, and makes you feel good about being here. So go back now, just think about those people that you jotted down. What traits do they bring? How can you take um, maybe your own businesses truly are the alien planet, and maybe now you can figure out how to roll these traits out. I do recommend Mark Fenner, Rise Performance Group. He has helped my institution tremendously become a great place to work and to help shape those values. Each of us plays a part in shaping the environment of our respective institutions. And I think we need, as leaders, again, whether you're serving on an ad hoc committee or you're the CEO, each of us has to provide clear communication for those behaviors. And then we have to set up rewards for the people living those organizational values. You'll end up with greater job satisfaction, um, better results, happier people. Thank you. Um, if I were there, I could say you have been a wonderful audience. Uh, there have been some chats. I didn't take the time to look at them. I think chats are coming in, and I think we get to do a question and answer. We got about, I don't know, 5-6 minutes for that.
Yes, we do have a few minutes. Thank you so much for sharing. And you're right, we've had lots of great chats come in from people, a lot of great takeaways, especially about leaders being depleted by their continued ethical actions. I know that talking about the moral licensing, that was something that really resonated with me as well. You talked about, trying to stay humble. Are there any other tips that you have for people who, maybe feel that depletion coming on, or could maybe start to make some of those justifications that you mentioned?
The research, says, I'll default back to the research, they're the experts. That self-care that was mentioned at the very beginning, when you are serving people, you have really got to make sure you are taking care of yourself. Sometimes that means stepping away, taking a retreat. Um, and I will, affirm this, that some of the research says bringing in an outside consultant, doing those 360 type evaluations just to help keep a lens. But I truly believe that a retreat where you can step back away, um, I am a giver. It's hard for me to step away, but having permission from a consultant to say you need to take 2 days to think about yourself and what you need as a leader, that that would be my recommendation. Again, that practicing humility, finding a group. I belong to a church, and on Sunday evenings, every other Sunday, we have some small time to help us just kind of recenter. But meditation, yoga, etc., these are ways to take care of yourself and create that recentering.
Great. I think that's really good advice. We had a question come in from Kathy. What is a good way for leaders to receive objective feedback on how they are exhibiting organizational values?
This one, I'm going to tell you, is probably the hardest in that communication, to allow, we do surveys, and I work for a regional university system, and they'll do a survey, an anonymous survey, to allow everyone, students, all employees, have the opportunity to voice strengths and weaknesses. So if there's some type of way to get that kind of feedback, but also being willing, the research does, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on which researcher said it, but modeling that behavior, speaking up in a group or speaking up in a community, if you belong to civic organizations, speaking up in public, when behavior is good and when behavior is bad. Being a true model for employees, that's what the research says, is find avenues to truly model that behavior in a safe way and to really ensure you don't have retribution when that sting, and I'm going to tell you, it will sting when you get those comments that maybe your own behavior wasn't above board, to be honest and say, okay, that was inappropriate. And I think working with students, I've learned this, students don't hold back. And so maybe with committees, just allowing the public come in and participate and give you that kind of feedback.
Yeah, thanks. Great insight. We have another one, and this is probably our last question, that I think is really relevant to where we are right now, with the broad impact of COVID and the resulting economic downturn. It looks like all of us across society are kind of depleted right now. And can we see this as a warning cry for all of us to, continue to live ethically in our daily lives? How do you feel like, do you see that depletion there? And what are your thoughts?
That's an excellent question, and the observation is spot on. We have recognized that, and a couple of things are at work. You are isolated from people. Zoom does isolate you, and there is something about isolation that leads to unethical behavior. And because you are isolated, I'm an extrovert and I draw energy from people. I'm not around people and getting that kind of energy. Depletion happens rapidly. So we are working, we're trying to find ways that don't have a solution. I wished I did. But we are trying to find ways to reward people for the great work they're doing. Today, the campus will actually close early. We're going to close at 4 today. We're going to go outside. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day. In our wind ensemble and our, I did that string ensemble and our wind ensemble are going to perform for our employees. Just a way to, it'll be outdoors, you're going to wear a mask, but it's a way to say we appreciate you, still connect with people, and try to put some energy back into us, because whoever made that comment, they are spot on. This depletes us, and I do believe that it could be a warning cry for behavior, bad behavior in the future.
Yes, well, that is exactly 12:30. So thank you so much, President Pierson, for sharing with us. This really was so insightful. I hope that you'll take a moment to read some of these chat comments. Just thanking you for sharing your wisdom, and I know that I feel like I even have a lot more to think about after hearing you speak today. So thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for coming and being with us for your lunch hour today. If you requested a CPE, please just share a quick note of thanks or say goodbye in the chat before signing out, so that we have that verification that you are still here. We do not have a presentation in December as we traditionally do. Well, actually, we don't traditionally have a presentation in December because we take a break for the holiday season. So if you would, please join us again in January. Dr. Talia Carroll, who's Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion at Oklahoma City University, will be with us to discuss what living abroad taught her about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think that will be a very interesting topic, and I hope you will all renew your memberships or be sure to register and join us in January. So we'll stay on for just a moment as we see all of these chats coming in, but we are adjourned today. And thank you again, President Pierson, for sharing with us.
Thank you. I'm seeing a lot of friends on here, and it's what a blessing, absolute blessing. Thank you.
Yes, lots of proud to be a Tiger comments.